My parents kicked me out on my 21st birthday without warning. 2 years later, I built a new life and they demanded money. I gave them the biggest shock of their lives. I never thought my life would take such a drastic turn on my 21st birthday. My name is Alex, 21M, and I always believed I had a decent relationship with my parents, Mark, 52M, and Linda, 49F. We had our ups and downs like any family, but I never imagined they would do something like this to me. Growing up, our family seemed normal enough. Dad worked as a manager at a local manufacturing plant, and Mom was a part-time real estate agent. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I had a pretty average childhood. I played Little League baseball, had sleepovers with friends, and argued with my parents about homework and chores like any kid. As I got older, I noticed that my parents seemed to be more interested in their own lives than in mine. They'd often go out with friends or on weekend trips, leaving me home alone. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was a teenager, after all, and I enjoyed the freedom. Looking back, maybe I should have seen it as a sign. When I started high school, I got a part-time job at a local grocery store. My parents insisted that I pay for my own car and insurance if I wanted to drive, so I saved up and bought an old Honda Civic. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. As my 21st birthday approached, I was excited. I was halfway through my junior year of college, studying business administration. I was doing well in my classes and had a small group of close friends. I thought my parents and I would celebrate together, maybe have a nice dinner or something. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. My parents sat me down at our dining table, and without any warning or explanation, they told me I had to leave our house immediately. I was shocked and confused. What had I done wrong? Why were they kicking me out? But they didn't give me any answers. They just said they wanted their freedom and that I was no longer welcome in their home. I pleaded with them to let me stay, reminding them that I was in the middle of the semester and had nowhere else to go. But they were cold and unfeeling. They didn't care that I had just started my junior year of college or that all my friends lived on campus. They just wanted me gone. I asked if I could at least stay until the end of the semester, just a few months away. They refused, saying I needed to be out by the end of the week. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the same people who had tucked me in at night, cheered at my little league games, and helped me with my college applications. Now they were treating me like an unwanted houseguest. I left the house that day feeling a betrayal I had never experienced before. I went to my room and started packing, still in disbelief. As I was throwing clothes into a duffel bag, I came across old photo albums and childhood mementos. It hit me then that I might never come back to this room, to this house. I felt tears welling up but forced them back. I wasn't going to let them see me cry. For the next few days, I tried to survive on my own. I slept in my car, which thankfully I had bought with my own money from that high school job. I showered at the gym and ate whatever cheap food I could afford. It was a humbling experience, and I felt like I had hit rock bottom. I tried to continue going to classes, but it was hard to focus when I didn't know where I was going to sleep each night. I couldn't concentrate on lectures when I was worried about where my next meal would come from. My grades started to slip, and I knew I needed to figure something out fast. As the days turned into weeks, I started to realize something. My parents didn't love me, they didn't care about me. They just wanted me out of their lives so they could have their freedom. It was a hard truth to accept, but it was the truth nonetheless. As I came to terms with it, I started to feel a sense of anger and defiance. I wasn't going to let my parents break me. I was going to survive, no matter what. During this time, I thought about my extended family. Most of them lived far away, and we weren't particularly close. But I remembered my grandmother, Edith, 75F, who lived a few states over. We hadn't seen each other much since I was a kid, but I remembered her as a kind, warm person. When I was younger, we used to visit Grandma Edith every summer. She lived in a small town in another state, in a cozy house with a big backyard. I have fond memories of helping her in her vegetable garden, learning to make her famous apple pie, and listening to her stories about when she was young. As I got older and busier with school and friends, those visits became less frequent. But I always remembered how she made me feel loved and valued. So, with nowhere else to turn, I decided to reach out to her. I called my grandmother and explained what had happened. She was shocked and appalled by my parents' behavior and immediately offered to help me. "Alex, sweetheart," she said, her voice full of concern, "you come right here. I've got plenty of room, and you shouldn't be out there on your own." I hesitated at first. I didn't want to be a burden, and the thought of moving so far away from everything I knew was scary. But Grandma Edith insisted, and honestly, I didn't have many other options. Within a few days, I was on a bus heading to my grandmother's house. The journey was long and uncomfortable, but as I watched the familiar landscape of my hometown fade away, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. I was leaving behind everything I knew, but maybe this was a chance for a fresh start. When I arrived, she greeted me with open arms and tears in her eyes. She couldn't believe that my parents had kicked me out on my 21st birthday with no warning or explanation. As she hugged me tightly, I felt safe for the first time in weeks. "Oh, Alex," she said, pulling back to look at me, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "We're going to get through this together, you hear me? You're not alone anymore. My grandmother was incredibly supportive. She gave me a room to sleep in, the same one I used to stay in during those summer visits. It was like stepping back in time, with the same quilted bedspread and model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. She cooked me meals, making sure I ate properly after weeks of living on fast food and whatever I could afford. But more than that, she helped me figure out how to continue my college education online. She sat with me as I called my university, explaining my situation and exploring my options. It wasn't easy, but we managed to work out a plan for me to finish the semester remotely. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had family again. I wasn't just a homeless college student anymore, I was a grandson being cared for by his loving grandmother. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but it was so much better than what I had been through. It was a shock to the rest of the family when they found out what had happened to me. They were all outraged by my parents' behavior and couldn't believe they could do something so heartless. But they were also relieved that I had found a safe place to stay. As I started to settle into my new life at my grandmother's house, I realized I couldn't let my parents get away with what they had done to me. I didn't want revenge, but I also didn't want to keep their behavior a secret. So, I decided to be honest with both my mother's and father's sides of the family about what had happened. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I didn't want to cause drama or make people take sides, but I also couldn't let my parents control the narrative. So, with my grandmother's support, I started reaching out to aunts, uncles, and cousins, telling them the truth about what had happened. While it caused some tension and discomfort within the family, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer carrying the burden of my parents' betrayal alone. Some family members were shocked, others were angry on my behalf, and a few even reached out to offer help. With my grandmother's help, I started to rebuild my life. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, which wasn't much but helped me start saving some money. I continued my online classes, determined not to let this setback derail my education. It wasn't easy balancing work and school, especially while dealing with the emotional fallout of what had happened, but I was determined to make it work. I was determined to make something of myself despite everything that had happened to me. Every day, I reminded myself that I was more than what my parents had done to me. I was going to succeed, not just to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I could overcome this. But then, about 2 months after I had been kicked out, my parents called me. I was surprised to see their number pop up on my phone. Part of me hoped that maybe they had come to their senses, that maybe they were calling to apologize and make things right. But I was wrong. They didn't apologize or express any remorse for what they had done. Instead, they explained that since I hadn't lied to the rest of the family about what had happened, they had suffered reputational damage, and they expected me to compensate them for it. I was stunned and completely taken aback. How could they expect me to give them money after what they had done to me? It was just another reminder that they didn't care about me at all. But I refused to let them break me. I stood my ground and refused to give them a single penny. I yelled at them about how they could even think to ask me for money after what they had done to me. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief rush through me. They threatened to sue me, but I told them that I knew they had no grounds to do so. As the argument escalated, my grandmother could hear the commotion and asked for the phone. She took it from me and told my parents off, calling them out for their behavior and their audacity to demand money from me. It was a surreal moment, but I was relieved knowing that my grandmother had my back. Now, I'm focusing on moving forward with my life. I'm working hard at my job and in my studies, and I'm grateful for the support of my grandmother and the rest of my extended family. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but I'm determined to succeed, not just for myself, but to prove to my parents that I can thrive without them. Some days are harder than others. There are times when I miss my old life, my friends back home, the familiarity of my hometown. But then I remember the betrayal, the hurt, and I know that I'm better off where I am now. I'm learning to build a new life, one day at a time. Update 1. It's been about 6 months since that fateful day when my parents kicked me out, and my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. I'm still living with my grandmother, Edith, in her cozy house that's become my sanctuary. The guest room I am staying in is slowly transformed into my own space, with textbooks stacked on the desk and a few posters on the walls. It's not much, but it's mine, and it represents the new life I'm building. I've been doing well in my online classes and even made the dean's list last semester. It wasn't easy at first, adjusting to online learning and dealing with the emotional aftermath of what happened. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, replaying the moment my parents told me to leave over and over in my head. But I pushed through, throwing myself into my studies as a way to cope and prove to myself that I could succeed despite everything. My job at the bookstore has been an unexpected source of comfort. My boss, Carol, 58F, has been incredibly understanding of my situation. When I first started, I was quiet and withdrawn, still processing everything that had happened. But Carol, with her kind smile and gentle demeanor, slowly drew me out of my shell. One day, about a month into the job, she found me in the back room during my break, staring blankly at a wall. Instead of ignoring it or asking if I was okay, she sat down next to me and started talking about books. She told me about her favorite authors, the stories that had touched her life, and before I knew it, I was engaged in a deep discussion about literature. It was the first time since everything happened that I felt normal. Since then, Carol has become something of a mentor to me. She's even offered me more hours, which has been a huge help financially. Between my job and my online classes, I'm keeping busy, which helps keep my mind off the more painful aspects of my situation. I've been saving most of my money, determined to build a stable future for myself. Every paycheck feels like a small victory, a step towards independence. I'm not making much, but it's more than I had 6 months ago, and that progress gives me hope. But just when I thought I had moved on from my parents, they decided to re-enter my life. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was helping my grandmother prepare dinner. We were making her famous pot roast, a recipe she'd promised to teach me. The kitchen was warm and filled with delicious smells, and for a moment, everything felt right in the world. That's when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but when I heard their voices on the other end of the line, I knew exactly who it was. My parents. My hand tightened around the phone, and I felt my grandmother's concerned gaze on me as I stepped out of the kitchen to take the call. They sounded contrite and sorry for what they had done. They even asked how I was doing and said they missed me. Their words were everything I had wanted to hear for months, but now they rang hollow. I was caught off guard by their sudden change in tone, but I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. I knew that their apologies were insincere and that they were only reaching out to me because they wanted something. As we talked, it became clear what their real motive was. They had run into some financial troubles and wanted to know if I could lend them some money. I was shocked at their audacity. After everything they had put me through, they had the nerve to ask me for money? I thought about the nights I spent sleeping in my car, about the meals I skipped because I couldn't afford food, about the fear and uncertainty I lived with for weeks. And now they wanted me to help them out of their financial troubles? I politely but firmly told them that I didn't need them in my life anymore and that I certainly wouldn't be giving them any money. At first, they seemed taken aback by my words, but then the anger started to seep through. They accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, saying that they had raised me and provided for me for 21 years. But I refused to let them guilt me into submission. I reminded them that they had thrown me out without warning, leaving me homeless and struggling. I told them that I didn't owe them anything and that they had lost the right to call themselves my parents when they kicked me out. The conversation ended with them yelling and making threats, but I stood my ground. After I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a sense of pride in myself for not giving in to their manipulation. My grandmother, who had overheard parts of the conversation, hugged me tightly and told me how proud she was of me for standing up for myself. Her support meant the world to me and reinforced my decision to keep my parents out of my life. That night, as we sat down to eat the pot roast we had made together, my grandmother shared stories about my mother when she was young. It was bittersweet to hear about the girl my mother used to be, so different from the woman who had thrown me out. But it also helped me understand that people can change, not always for the better, and that it wasn't my fault that my parents had become who they are. This incident made me realize how far I've come since that terrible day 6 months ago. I'm stronger now, more independent, and I know my worth. I'm not going to let anyone, not even my parents, take advantage of me or make me feel less than I am. As I continue to move forward with my life, I'm focusing on the positive relationships I have, with my grandmother, my extended family, and the new friends I've made at work and through my online classes. These are the people who truly care about me and support me, and they're the ones I want in my life. I've also started to think more seriously about my future. Before all this happened, I was just going through the motions in college, not really sure what I wanted to do with my life. But now, I have a new sense of purpose. I'm considering switching my major to social work or counseling. I want to be able to help other young people who might be going through similar situations. It's still just an idea, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. Update 2, it's been nearly a year since I was kicked out, and life has taken some unexpected turns. I'm still living with my grandmother, working at the bookstore, and continuing my online classes. But a few weeks ago, something happened that shook things up again. My cousin Tyler, 23M, who I've always been close to, reached out to me. Tyler and I grew up together, spending summers playing video games and getting into harmless trouble. Even though we hadn't talked much since I moved, he was still someone I considered a good friend. When I saw his name pop up on my phone, I was excited to hear from him. But the news he shared left me stunned. Tyler told me that my parents had been spreading lies about me to the rest of the family. They've been telling everyone that I left voluntarily because I was ungrateful and wanted to live a wild lifestyle. They even claimed that I had stolen money from them before leaving. I was furious when I heard this. It was bad enough that they had kicked me out and then tried to extort money from me, but now they were actively trying to ruin my reputation with the rest of the family. I felt like I was being betrayed all over again. Tyler, bless him, didn't believe a word of it. He knew me better than that and remembered how devastated I was when it all happened. He recalled the day he found out I had left, how confused and worried he was when he couldn't reach me. When he finally heard from me and learned what had happened, he was shocked and angry on my behalf. Now, hearing these lies, Tyler was determined to set things right. He suggested that we reach out to the rest of the family and tell them the truth. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to stir up more drama or seem like I was seeking attention. I had been trying to move on with my life, and this felt like a step backward. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't let these lies stand. I had worked too hard to rebuild my life to let my parents tear it down with their falsehoods. Plus, I owed it to the family members who had supported me to be honest with them. So, Tyler and I decided to reach out to our other cousins and aunts and uncles. We set up a video call with everyone, and I told my story, the whole truth, from the day I was kicked out to the recent phone call asking for money. It wasn't easy reliving those moments. As I spoke, I could feel all the emotions I had experienced over the past year bubbling up again, the shock, the fear, the anger, the sadness. But I also felt a sense of relief as I spoke. It was like I was finally able to fully express everything I had been holding inside. Some family members were shocked, others were angry on my behalf, and a few even cried. But most importantly, they believed me. They could see the pain in my eyes as I recounted my experiences, and they knew I wasn't making this up. After the call, I received an outpouring of support from my family. My Aunt Maria, 47F, offered to help me find internships in my field of study. She works in HR and has a lot of connections in various industries. My Uncle Dave, 55M, said he had some connections that might be able to help me transfer to a physical university if I wanted to. Even my younger cousins reached out, offering words of encouragement and support. This experience made me realize how important it is to stand up for the truth, even when it's difficult. I'm grateful for the support of my extended family and for Tyler's initiative in helping me clear my name. It's comforting to know that even though my parents have turned their backs on me, I still have a family who cares about me and believes in me. As for my parents, I've decided to maintain my distance. Their actions have shown me time and time again that they don't have my best interests at heart. It's a painful realization, but I've come to accept that the loving parents I thought I had were just an illusion. I'm focusing on the positive relationships in my life and on building a future for myself. With the support of my grandmother, my extended family, and friends like Carol from the bookstore, I feel more confident than ever that I can overcome this challenging chapter in my life and create a bright future for myself. Update 3, it's been almost 2 years since that life-changing day, and I'm writing this update from my new apartment. Yes, you read that right, I've finally moved out on my own. After the video call with my extended family, things started looking up. My Aunt Maria came through with an internship opportunity at a local marketing firm. It was unpaid, but the experience was invaluable. I balanced it with my bookstore job, and while it was challenging, it was also incredibly rewarding. The internship was eye-opening. I got to work on real marketing campaigns, learn about digital advertising, and even contribute ideas in team meetings. My supervisor, John, 35M, took me under his wing and taught me so much about the industry. He was impressed by my work ethic and determination, often staying late to help me understand complex concepts. The internship led to a part-time position, and eventually, a full-time job offer upon my graduation. I completed my degree online, and with my new job, I was able to save enough for a deposit on a small apartment. Moving day was emotional. My grandmother, who had been my rock through all of this, helped me pack and unpack. We both shed a few tears, but they were happy ones. As we arranged my meager belongings in the new space, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. From sleeping in my car to having my own apartment, it felt surreal. I'm not moving far from my grandmother, and I've promised to visit her for dinner at least once a week. She's become more than just my grandmother over these past 2 years, she's my best friend, my confidant, and my biggest supporter. As for my parents, they made one last attempt to contact me a few months ago. They showed up unannounced at my grandmother's house, demanding to see me. Thankfully, I wasn't there, but my grandmother stood her ground and refused to let them in. She called me immediately after, and we decided it was time to take legal action. With the help of my Uncle Dave, who knows a good lawyer, I filed for a restraining order against my parents. It wasn't an easy decision, but I realized it was necessary for my peace of mind and safety. The thought of them showing up at my new apartment or my workplace terrifies me, and I need to protect the life I've worked so hard to build. The hearing is next month, and I'm nervous but determined. I have documentation of their actions, from the initial eviction to their attempts at extortion and the lies they spread. My extended family has also offered to testify on my behalf if needed. Through all of this, I've learned so much about myself and about the true meaning of family. It's not always about blood relations, but about the people who stand by you, support you, and love you unconditionally. My grandmother, my extended family, my coworkers, they've become my true family. As I sit in my new apartment, looking at the life I've built for myself, I feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. It hasn't been an easy journey, but I'm stronger for it. I'm excited about what the future holds, and I'm grateful for the genuine relationships I've formed along the way. To anyone out there who might be going through something similar, remember this: you are stronger than you know, and there are people out there who will support you. Don't be afraid to reach out and stand up for yourself. Your life is yours to live, and you deserve happiness and respect.